Hey guys, Zomfox here, and today we're going to be looking at 5 of the most overvalued cards of the Scarlet and Violet era for Pokemon. Scarlet and Violet era is over. We are doing something that we really haven't seen since Gen 4, which is where we have multiple TCG eras within one generation. Obviously, Gen 4, we saw the Platinum era, the Diamond and Pearl era, and the Heart Gold Soul Silver era, and we're seeing that now as we are leaving the Scarlet and Violet era and going into the Mega Evolution era. So the Scarlet and Violet era is over. And, well, this era has been a very controversial one. Illustration rares were initially not really viewed as big deals. Then when people started getting around to them, you had that huge boom, you had the pocket boom. Investors made boxes and scalpers made boxes incredibly difficult to find at reasonable prices. Cards being bought out, insane just overall markets. And now the era is over. I wanted to look at 5 of the most overvalued cards from this entire era. Now, this is not a top 5. These are just 5 of the most overvalued cards. And if you want to see a second one, let me know down in the comments. So let's get on right in with this, with the first one being the Pikachu with gray felt hat. This one is pretty obvious. When you see that this market value is $455, if you know what this card is, you know this is already insane. So this gray felt hat Pikachu card, essentially when it first came out, was one that you had to get like museums that you could go to with Van Gogh stuff you could get them at, and then they ended up putting on the Pokemon Center site. And they essentially did to this card what they said they're going to be doing with Prismatic, which is printing it into the ground. Because we'll talk about it in a little bit, but this card was printed into the ground. This was a very, 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 very high printed card, and it is absurd that it's worth the money it is. Now, when you look at the 3-month graph, you're already seeing insane growth recently, as during this mid-July, really around, this point, till August, you're seeing insane growth of over $100. And the year graph is even worse. A year ago, this card was under $100, and it's just been spiking and spiking, having 2 separate, not full spikes, but basically spikes, with this one going from, obviously, back in September till March, and then the one we just talked about a second ago. This card is just not deserving of this. I mean, let's call it is like the Van Gogh self-portrait. It's not like the Mona Lisa. Yes, it's an iconic painting, but it's not, Starry Night. And it's arguably not even as iconic as Scream, and I say argue for that because of the biggest reasons why this card is overvalued. And that is the Scream promos themselves. These Scream promos came out years ago during the Sun and Moon era. And those cards are significantly rarer than this gray felt hat Pikachu. Yet in terms of value, technically aren't actually worth more. Now, when you look at the Pikachu itself, when you look at the PSA 10 pop report, you have 42,000 graded essentially that are a 10. And you have 88,000 graded in total. It is the most graded Pokemon card of all time. And it has nearly a 50% gem rate. So this in a PSA 10 is not even remotely difficult to get. This is a very easy 10. It's not as easy as a Japanese card, obviously, but it is easy. Now, compared to the Scream promos. The Scream promos, there were 5 of them. In total, so all 5 combined, there are 34,300 roughly graded. There are less Scream promos graded in general, between all 5, than there are PSA 10s of the Pikachu. You know what the worst part about this is? The Rowlet in a PSA 10, you can get for the same price as this Pikachu Gray fell out in the 10. The Pikachu in a 10, the last 10 sales have averaged roughly $1,000. So to see that this Pikachu is $1,000 in a 10 compared to the Rowlet being $1,000, I mean, it's not even a comparison. The Rowlet is just objectively the much more significantly better card. It encompasses the era that it was in. Obviously, that and the Mimikyu are both being, those Gen 7 Pokemon in a Gen 7 card. It is still, the Scream portrait. I mean, obviously the best looking of all the promos is the Mimikyu, or not the Mimikyu, the Psyduck, even though Psyduck's value isn't as good as it should be. But the point is, the Rowlet being as much as this Pikachu is absurd. This really does show just how overvalued the Pikachu is. And this isn't even also talking about the stamp promos. Essentially what's going on with this Pikachu Gray felt hat is this is the ultimate investor bro card. That's what it really is. It is people looking back at these Scream promos, looking back at the stamp promos, and to a lesser extent even the Poncho Pikachus, and believing that this card is going to be just as fruitful as an investment as those other cards were. Despite the fact that this card is objectively common. From a statistical standpoint, this is it actually is the most common Pokemon card from a graded perspective, especially in a 10. Almost 42,000 copies graded. Give it another week, this card probably will hit 42,000. There are still a ton of cards out there that could easily get 10s with this card. It is still a new one. And so, To see it being worth as much as it is, especially compared to the Scream promos, makes absolutely no sense, and it is just insane to think there are some people who think this card is going to continue to go up. In terms of raw TCG value, it really should be about a $200 card. It just should. And a PSA 10 should be maybe $500. And even then, that's a bit much. Compare this promo to like the Charmander promo from, the PC promo from Obsidian Flames. That card, much harder to get in a 10. That card overall, less overall graded compared to this Pikachu. That's a better card, yet this Pikachu still is able to have, raw at least really good value. Like, this isn't even the best promo out there for the Scarlet Violet era, not counting like, special world type promos or, those kind of things. Not even counting those, this isn't even the best Scarlet Violet era promo just in general. Hell, even the year this came out and it wasn't the best. Arguably not even the second best, because I think the Pikachu from Paldea Evolved is also a better card in terms of overall. Like, this card, it was hyped up a ton, and it feels like it's an investor bro idea of why it's worth as much as it is. Because the bottom line is, as much as people want to say it is, this is not Moonbreon. This is not as iconic a card as Moonbreon. It won't be viewed as that. It is not a Mount Rushmore of the Scarlet Violet era card. This is easily the first one we had to talk about for being overvalued, as this is pretty much the poster child, well, one of the two poster childs of being an overvalued card in the Scarlet Violet era. The number 2 overvalued card we're going to be talking about is the Umbreon EX SIR from Prismatic Evolutions, also known as the Sunbreon to some people. You knew this one was coming. This is the other poster child. Like I said, this isn't technically a top 10, or a top 5, I should say, in terms of overvalued cards, but if you were to pick 2 above all, this one and the Grey Felha Pikachu would obviously be the 2 you talk about. When you look at this one, it just really does not make sense that it is worth what it is. When you look at this value, it is currently an $841 near mint buy you can buy right now, but in terms of the value, it's $844. This is just crazy. $844 for this card is absurd. This isn't even that great a looking SIR. Just take away how much money it is. If you were to do a tier list like I've been doing every other week on the channel, this is a card that, spoiler, is not S tier and not even really A tier. It's just not as good as Moonbreon, which we'll talk about in a second. Let's look at this graph. 3-month graph. $1,200 card 3 months ago. It's just been tanking. But the worst part is, I don't even think this is really, enough. And look, you even have, this one where you had a decent amount. You had 12 be sold here, and the price just kept going down. Usually when you see a lot of cards get bought pretty quickly, you're going to expect it to go up, but no. Now, there was the overall year graph, because this set has been out for, a little over 6 months now, believe it or not. This card used to be a $1,600 card. And the graph just keeps going down. And the bottom line is, it should continue to go down. This is a card that has no business being even over $500, if we're being completely honest. Basically, the whole Charizard hype that people used to have, right, ended up transitioning to Umbreon. So now we have Umbreon getting all this hype, despite the fact that Umbreon, it's like Charizard. We're going to see eventually, just like what happened to Charizard, is that Umbreon isn't as popular as people are making it out to be at the moment. It still is a very popular Pokemon, but it's not like Charizard in the past. And while Charizard obviously has always been a poster child, Umbreon has kind of become that in recent times. This is a card that's proof of that, because this card has no business being an $800 card. I also could arguably make this entire list of just prismatic cards. Even a lot of the other evolutions are still overvalued, but this one is just egregious. I mean, when you compare this to the Umbreon VMAX, the Moonbreon from the Sword and Shield Evolving Skies, you're talking about just an absurd value. Look at the PSA 10 average sale price. The Moonbreon is roughly $3,000 right now, whereas the Sunbreon is about $2,700. And yes, the Sunbreon at the moment is significantly less graded. It's got 2,600 in a PSA 10 compared to the 17,000 that the Moonbreon had. That is true and that is fair. Also note, the Prismatic card, it's still new. This is still a set that is being printed. New boxes, not restock boxes, but new boxes are still coming out. I mean, we just got the UPC a couple of weeks ago, and if the Pokemon Company is honest with what they said, they're going to keep printing this set. I mean, hell, we're still seeing 151 every now and again get restocked on places. So who's to say this card just doesn't keep getting printed for up until the end of 2026, maybe even the beginning of 2027? And at the moment, you still have, 7,400 graded. Yes, the gem rate is a lower one than at a 35.5%, whereas the Moonbreon was a very high gem rate card itself. But the Moonbreon TCG market value raw, $1,355. So right now, the Moonbreon is not worth as much as the peak for the Sunbreon. And the Sunbreon is still within that 500 from it, which is absurd. When you look at these cards next to each other, it is no comparison. The Moonbreon is not the better looking card, it's the significantly better looking card. Yes, art is subjective, but are you with a straight face going to say that you honestly think that the Sunbreon is a far better looking card and that the average person will say it's a better looking card? If you were to show just an average Joe both these cards, which looks better, they're going to say the Moonbreon every single time. The Moonbreon is the most iconic card of the Sword and Shield era. The Sunbreon, I would argue, isn't even in the top 10. I mean, when you talk about being iconic and instantly recognizable, the only reason people know it is because of the value. The Moonbreon became valuable because of how much people liked it, whereas the Sunbreon was valuable in spite of the artwork. I mean, when you talk about iconic cards, the Magikarp's more iconic, the Greninja's more iconic, Bubble Mew, pretty much all three Charizards, the Gardevoir. Well, I say the Gardevoir, both Gardevoirs. Hell, some of the trainer ones like Miriam and Iono early on were pretty iconic. And then from the later sets, the Surging Sparks Pikachu. Even Giovanni's Mewtwo, I think, is more iconic than the Sunbreon. I really think this card is just absurd. The fact that there are going to be more and more of these copies being graded, the fact that it is clearly the inferior artwork to the Moonbreon, and was clearly done in a weird way to be like the Moonbreon, where you have this very, eccentric background, and then you have, the sun right behind, or what looks like the sun, obviously is why it's called Sunbreon. It's not good. This card is textbook overvalued, and we're really seeing it with it going down, down, down in value. At max, this Umbreon EX, I would say 400, but when you consider how much some cards like the Greninja and Magikarp are, if you compare those, this Umbreon really shouldn't even be over $300. The only reason I still say it should be worth something is because Prismatic's pull rates and just how many SIRs are in the set inherently should have more value than other ones. But to say this card should be worth, even 2x the Greninja SIR from Twilight Masquerade is absurd. The Greninja is a significantly better card. Insane. This is textbook overvalued. The number 3 overvalued card we're going to be talking about is the Charizard EX SIR from 151. This is one that I feel should have been somewhat obvious. Now, you might be saying, it's not that expensive of a card. It's only a 214 market value. Yes, that's not a lot, but just because you're not a $500 card doesn't mean you're overvalued. This card is definitely overvalued. I've talked about before, as I did a 151 tier list, as I mentioned tiers before, I did a 151 one with all the IRs and SIRs. This isn't even the best SIR in the set, and really isn't even the second best. The Blastoise SIR is a better looking card, number 1. And number 2, for being a 151 staple, the Zapdos makes more sense. The Zapdos is a beautiful card, has all 3 of the legendary birds on it, whereas this one isn't even really Charizard in a way, because, it's like the whole joke's the fat neck Charizard. Charizard's supposed to have, a long neck. This one doesn't even really have a neck, period. And the actual artwork itself, it's not like the Pidgey line from Obsidian Flames, where it's done in that very, I don't want to say rudimentary, but in terms of the artwork to a feel, it has that, but it, is great. This one is doing that, but not going full rudimentary to where it gets that kind of, just doesn't look all that great. This whole evolution line really isn't great, and the only reason people seem to really love it is because it's from 151. When you look at this evolution line compared to either the Bulbasaur or Squirtle line, those two lines just blow this out of the water. I mean, card for card, Squirtle and Bulbasaur are both better than Charmander, and that's the same with, middle evolutions, and it's the same with the final evolutions. And so to see this card being a $200 card makes no sense, especially compared to like the Zapdos, where it's nowhere near this one. And when you look at the year graph for this one, this card has always been overvalued, even at 127. Considering how much the Zapdos is, whatever the Zapdos is, this card should be at most 3/4 of it. So even back then when it was 127, it was still overvalued. Then this card spiked, eventually hit 300 during that real big boom we had in early 2025. It's gone down, but then it's going back to that 213. Still overvalued, and I'm not even talking about the Zapdos. We have other proofs or other examples of proof this card is overvalued. And those proofs are the other 2 Charizard SIRs. For those of you that don't know because you just got in the Pokemon hobby like in the last few months, Charizard has 3 SIRs in this era from different sets. He has this 151, and then he has one from Obsidian Flames and one from Paldea and Fates. Both those cards look better than this one. Like, just straight up, they're better, and it's not even close. The Obsidian Flames one, that Charizard is insanely undervalued and underappreciated. Well, undervalued, the only issue is that set was really easy to pull it, but the card itself is very underrated as a card. The Charizard from Obsidian Flames, super beautiful card, really is iconic, and is much better than the 151. Paldean Fates one. I really like it. I don't know if I like it more than the Obsidian Flames one, but I like it a lot more in this 151 one. And that one being 194, yeah, that makes more sense when you consider that this 151 is 213, but the Paldean Fates should be worth more. When you talk about value from these ones, the Paldean Fates one should be worth at least 150% more than the Charizard from 151. And the Obsidian Flames one, due to the pull rates, despite it being the better card, due to the pull rates, I do think it should be worth the same as the 151 Charizard. Just because if you were around for Obsidian Flames, you know this card was not that hard to pull. Even though it is a much better artwork and overall card than the Charizard EX from 151. As well as the fact that in terms of a playability standpoint with the TCG, the Charizard EX from 151 was like a never used card, whereas we've been seeing a resurgence to the Charizard EX from, Obsidian Flames and Paldean Fates. So in terms of that iconic, it's like the Shaman EX from, X and Y. The card was very iconic because of how good it was in the TCG, same with the Seismitoad. So the Obsidian Flames Charizard, due to the pull rates, due to how expensive 151 is, should be worth the same as the 151 Charizard, and the Paldean Fates Charizard should be 150% of the 151. But, alas, it's not. Now, the Charizard from 151 itself is another really graded card. Almost 70,000. You're just about 2,000 away from 70,000 total graded. Now, the PSA 10 is a lower gem rate at 31.7, so that, makes it sound like, oh, it's a tough card to get in a high grade. The one issue is you still have 21,000 in a PSA 10. This is another one of the more graded cards of all time. The Scarlet Violet era have some cards that have just been insanely graded, which shows just how much has been printed. And when you look at it, $1,000 nearly for a PSA 10, again, back to the Scream Rowlet. That Scream Rowlet we talked about earlier can be had for the same price as this Charizard EX from 151. Which one is better? It's no comparison. You have one of the most iconic promo sets the TCG has ever had in that Scream promo set. You can get one of those in a PSA 10 compared to a really, really overpopulated PSA 10 of 21,000. Again, this isn't the same, but over 50% of all the Scream promos, that's how much this is graded in a 10. Just out of this world. This Charizard EX, definitely overvalued. From a pure, how much dollar perspective, obviously not as much as like the Moonbreon or the Sunbreon and the Great Violet Pikachu. Like I said, I think this card, whatever the Obsidian Flames is worth, this should be worth that. Judging by the current market value, let's say the Paldean Fates averages to 200. If that's a $200 market value, I would say that the Obsidian Flames and 151 Charizard should be worth probably like 125-ish, if you were to say that. Now, the Zapdos itself should be worth also what this card is worth now, but this is still an overvalued card percentage-wise, and that's why it's on this list. The number 4 overvalued card we're going to be talking about is the Bubble Mew, the Mew EX from Paldean Fates SIR. This is a card that has been spiking. Let's just go straight into this graph. Look at the insane spike this card has been at. This isn't even the 3 months. You can even just do the 1 month graph. Within the last month, it went from a $355 card to a $580. Now, across the year, it's been one of those wild climbers. This card was a $90 card a year ago, and I remember knowing somebody who picked one up for $80. Then this card spiked a bit, spiked a lot right around October to jump to $170. Then it spiked in November to hit $300. Fell a little bit, spiked to $400 in late January during that boom. Was just going down consistently, and then it spiked. And now it's got the market value of $578, making this one of the most expensive chase cards. I don't know, man. Now, the artwork itself is one that is very divisive. There's a lot of people who really love it because of the simplistic style it has. Again, it's one of these, USG men cards. But there's other people that really hate it because of how insanely basic it is. I'm on kind of the middle ground. I don't think this is really an incredible artwork. I don't think this is a bad artwork. I think that this is a really fun one. I do like it for that aspect. But when I do my Paldean Fates tier list, am I going to put this in S? No. But am I going to hate this and put it in D? Also no. I'd probably say this is a B tier artwork. It's not incredible. It's not bad. It's good. I can understand why somebody would love it. And I can also understand why somebody would hate it. But it is still overvalued. And there is one clear-cut reason to why this is overvalued. And that is the Greninja EX SIR from Twilight Masquerade. When you look at these cards side by side, there is no comparison. This is somebody whose favorite Pokemon is Delphox. This is somebody who had never bought the hype with Greninja and why he was so popular. That Greninja card is way, I mean way nicer than the Mew EX, the Bubble Mew. When you look at these cards side by side, it's no contest. The Greninja EX is just done almost perfectly. It is one of the overall best looking cards of the entire era because it has so much going on, but it has just enough to where it's not overboard. You have the water shurikens around. You have this just great overall artwork around Greninja. Greninja is still the pronounced figure. It is, in terms of an objective artwork, as objective you can be when you're criticizing artwork, it's almost as perfect a card as you can get in this era. Whereas the Bubble Mew, obviously, it's the Bubble Mew. And as the people would joke about it, you can make this in Microsoft Paint in 20 minutes. But in terms of the values, the Twilight Masquerade Greninja is 300 raw averaged, whereas the Mew is averaged to 600. So the Mew is 2x the value of the Greninja. Now the Greninja has about a 50% gem rate compared to the 40% gem rate Mew. So these are both on the easier side, especially the Greninja. But the Greninja in a 10 is 800 compared to the Bubble Mew, which is $2,000. And the Bubble Mew is another one that is a very, very, very high graded card at 31,705 at the time of recording, compared to the PSA 10 pop of 12,564. You were trying to tell me with a straight face that a 40% gem rate card that is 30,000 total graded, over 30,000 total graded, and over 12,000 in a PSA 10 should be worth over double in a PSA 10 compared to the Greninja, and should be worth over, or essentially double, the raw. You're just out of your mind. You can view this however you want. Either this means that you should view that the Greninja should be worth $800 raw and $3,000 in a 10, or you should view this that the prices should be swapped, which is what I probably would say. The Greninja EX, in all honesty, this feels a lot like the Blaziken VMAX from Sword and Shield. The Blaziken VMAX from Sword and Shield took a while before it really started spiking in value, despite the fact that the more and more you looked at it, it was clearly one of the best alt-arts of the Sword and Shield era, but not a lot of people were really, hyping it up as much as they should, despite it being a clear chase card for the era. And then eventually people realized that, and I feel like this Greninja is one that's going to have happened to it itself. This is clearly one of the best artworks of the entire era, and the fact that it is worth half of what the Mew EX is absurd. The Mew EX is overvalued, and again, being generous, not putting up other ones, but the Charizard from this set as well is a better looking card. The Gardevoir, I would argue, is a better looking card, and you can get both those cards and still have some money left over compared to this Mew EX. That's crazy. What really is the big deal with this Mew EX, I think a lot of people aren't talking about it, is the 151 Mew EX. The English set did not make it a SIR. They made it into a promo for the UPC. And very recently, that card has been spiking, especially in a 10. What I feel like has happened is that a lot of people who collected 151 and who liked that 151 stuff, right, obviously, you couldn't pull, there was no pack pulled huge Mew. The biggest card was like the gold one. So you didn't have the SIR being a pullable card in 151. Then you have the next specialty set coming around, and you have a pullable 151 Mew EX. I feel like it's part of the reason why this card is expensive as it is, because aside from that theory, there is absolutely no reason this card is 2x the Greninja. It's just nowhere near the card it is. So that's why this is the fourth card we're talking about. And the fifth and final card we're going to be talking about today is the Victini Black-White Rare from both White Flare and Black Bolt. Now this one is a bit hard to fully discuss because the set is still so new, but I feel like at least looking at the initial value of this card, it just does not make sense. Now, for the sake of comfort and easy, we're just going to be looking at the White Flare overall value graph because, again, the set's barely been out. The value graph, obviously, this card came out, it was like $500, and then it's just been tanking to $470. Now, market value being $467, this card is overvalued. Now, as somebody who, this wasn't like when I was fully collecting, but I did open packs, and I still have my Zekrom that I pulled from Black and White. The original Black and White set did not have a Victini in it. Did not have a red Victini. There was the black full art Zekrom, and technically the gray one if you want to be technical with arrows or whatever, and you had the Reshiram white one. You had two full arts that have become very iconic now, a lot of that because of this, and that's what inspired the Black-White rares. Granted, those were just full arts, they weren't even Black-White rares, which is hilarious, but the point is, there was no Victini. So this is a card that does not have that nostalgia factor going for it. This is a truly new card. And the fact is, it's in two sets. So let's just look at that for a second. Now, what I have here, the left numbers are your White Flare sets, the right numbers are your Black Bolt sets. The PSA 10 last 10 sales, that's just overall. They're very similar because of how new the stud is. The overall average is about 1,700. Now, the TCG market value raw is the 268 we just talked about for the white flare, and then the black bolt is 440. PSA 10 pop at the moment, again, this is going to continue going up. This set is still really new. 94 for white flare, 132 for black bolt. 70% is roughly for the white flare gem rate, and 75% for black bolt. Total graded 135 versus 176. Now, compare that to the Reshiram and Zekrom black-white rares. The raw for them is currently 431 and 407. So they're actually less than the Victini right now, which is insane. I mean, the Reshiram and Zekrom, those are the ones that go back to the OG one. And also, again, in terms of the game, both of these cards are used in a lot of decks. Now, not super meta decks like Charizard, but they have been seeing a big resurgence, not resurgence, but a big usage, as Zekrom EX has fit really well into those, electric versus Magneton, whichever one you use, and even Joltik box decks. And Reshiram in like Ethan's Ho-Oh decks, and Charizard EX decks, Ceruledge, it works in them. So you have two cards that are pretty playable. And again, these are great artworks. They are able to make you think back to the originals without being the exact same, right? This isn't like Legendary Treasures where they made the gold cards, where those gold full arts were the exact same card as the full art, just, with the gold textures. These are inspired by the old ones, but still being new. The fact that these cards are worth less is already insane, and the fact that the Victini can be pulled in both sets also is bad. Now, we don't know exact pull rate stuff. Again, amount graded. So far, the Reshiram and Zekrom are more graded. A lot of that is probably because those are the more desirable ones to a lot of people. We'll see how it goes in the future overall, blah, blah, blah. But even if these cards, let's just say for the sake of argument that the Victini was essentially put in half, like they put half its production in one set, half in the other one, to where it's all three of them are equal. Even then, the Victini should be the third most valuable of the three. And also, the fact this card is worth more than, again, the Greninja, again, both the non-151 Charizards, it's Victini. Look, a lot of people can say they like Victini. The bottom line is Victini is not Mew. It's not Celebi. It's not like one of the top iconic mythicals of all time. And especially for this set being concerned, it's not Zekrom or Reshiram. And the fact this card is already worth more than those it's just, yes, it is very early to tell, but at the moment, this card feels like it's an overvalued card. It feels like out of the gate, this card should have been more like a $300 card, and these Zekrom and Reshiram are actually kind of where they are. I hate saying that because I want to get the Zekrom for my, Zekrom collection, but I do think the Reshiram and Zekrom starting out at $400 is actually pretty fair. I don't think it's overvalued or undervalued. But the Victini should have been around like $300 or like $275. It should have been basically 75% of whatever the Reshiram and Zekrom is off the gate, and then see exactly how desirability goes. A lot of this is made to a lot of people is because of the fact that if you want to collect the Black Bolt or White Flare sets, you obviously have to get the Victini. So for that aspect, I kind of get it on why the values are what they are. But there's only so many people that are purely collecting sets. And I say that because it's not like other cards have seen just super spikes because of, it's set collecting. Because if that was the case, in almost every SIR would be worth a lot of money, you know what I mean? So it's really awkward. I don't know, I feel like this card is overvalued right off the rip. And if it continues to go down, I think that's deserved. If the two black-white rares of Reshiram and Zekrom continue to stabilize where they're at, I also think that's deserved. But we'll have to wait and see about that. But at least at the moment, while it is new, the Victini I do think is overvalued. But overall, that'll do it. This has been Zomfox. Let me know down below if you agree or disagree with any of these picks. Again, I think that it's, especially the first two are obvious. I think the Great Fallout Pikachu and Sunbreon are clearly overvalued, and I really would like to hear anyone try to fully defend their values. Whereas a card like the Victini, I could see an argument. Bubble Mew I could, but I don't think they are. And also, let me know if you want me to do another one in the future. I wouldn't do it like within the next week or two, but maybe in a couple months if you guys want to see another top 5, or not top 5, but another 5, like 5 more overvalued Scarlet Violet cards I could. Because there's definitely some other promos that are still overvalued. And there's some lesser dollar cards, like there's some, SIR trainers that aren't really playable that are worth money and really shouldn't be. So there's still a lot that I could do with this. Let me know down below what you think. If you enjoyed this video, again, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Helps the analytics out a lot. Obviously, you're still a new channel, trying to hit that 10 subscriber goal. Obviously, the first goal we hit. Then the goal will be like 50. And as always, guys, have a great night.